I'm going to start recording. I should get some warning at some point.
A wonderful warning that makes it confusing to know, wait, do I want to leave or do the other thing? Okay, got it.
I swear there's been some UX done on this in the 90s. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the SIG Network bi-weekly call. It is February 17th, a Thursday. It is 2 in the afternoon California time. As usual, the Kubernetes code of conduct applies here, which boils down to be excellent to each other. That said, let's get rolling. We have some agenda today, but we usually start with triage. I have queued up triage unless somebody else wants to do it. Okay, let me go ahead and do that. Chrome window. Where did it go? I lost it. Oh, there we go. Can everybody see?
Yep.
All right. So we have only a few today, and most of them are not particularly new. So there's this one, long delay creating endpoints when periodic service resync happens. I read it over. It sounds like a fun but legitimate bug, and there's a pull request already open to it. So I don't know if TNQN is on the call or not, but it sounds like they have it under control.
Yeah, I think this is referring to endpoint slices, if I remember the PR correctly. I'm on the PR. I did not look at this issue, but I think it's the fix that they're describing. Oh no, this is actually, yeah, assign me. Oh.
It's related to the slices because he
actually
found
just brought Scott on GitHub. Yeah.
He found the slices problem fixing this one.
Okay. I'm going to take triage off because it sounds like it's legit. I had a chat with them a little bit on Slack yesterday too. Next, deprecating IPs with leading zeros. Antonio picks up the ball and runs with it. This is a great issue. It's more of a to-do list than an issue. Antonio, do you intend to carry forward, or are we going to try to find volunteers to help do all these?
I'm going to carry forward because I have to fix it for OpenShift too.
Okay.
But
awesome.
I mean, everybody is welcome to. I expect to drag you here because I mean the list is not. I mean, there are many things.
Well, but also it'll take 2 years to get done. So.
I propose that we just revert Antonio's earlier patch, get rid of the sloppy parsing, use the upstream parsing everywhere, and assume that anybody who actually had leading zeros in their IPs was getting buggy behavior before.
I suggested that 10 times to Tim, and I couldn't force it down.
I can't bring myself to blame someone who did something that we allowed them to do and then reward them for that by completely hosing their cluster, or at least this one particular service.
We can't just fix the glitch. It's a load-bearing bug.
I mean, I don't know how much load it's bearing, but we've got to like get it out before we can. You got to drill out the cavity before you can fill it.
What if I said, if Tim can find at least one person anywhere who has at least one IP address anywhere in their cluster with a leading zero, then we'll fix it. But otherwise, we just revert.
I'm not sure I can make that argument because all my efforts at phoning home have fallen on negative responses. If you want to, we can debate the real risk versus reward on this. We can do it on this issue. I haven't honestly gone and scoured all of the GKE clusters to see if there's anybody who's done this. I could. I'm not sure that alone is compelling.
So expected behavior is to treat it as an octal, right? If it's a zero, or that's
no.
what it used to be a long time ago. If you so to start with a zero, that's an octal.
That's the CVE. So Golang expect to be a decimal, and the problem is that whoever reads that can interpret it as decimal or as an octal.
So yeah, Go used to read 011 as 11, not 9.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so if you read on, I mean, the old history of IP addresses was expected to be an octal, right? So
Yeah, right. So
in this case, it's been expected to be 11 because that's how people have used it.
So the problem here is if somebody's done this and they have one of these IPs stored, and we just say, well, we're updating to the new parser that doesn't allow that at all, they will never be able to update that service.
No, exactly. And store as a string and not as an int. But yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well, we can carry.
Confused. I revert my previous suggestion. I thought Golang previously did the stupid octal behavior.
No, that's the correct behavior. That's the problem. But
it is the defined behavior. It is not the correct behavior.
Okay, I agree with you on that. Yes.
So we can carry the conversation in this issue, but basically this issue proposes that we, over several releases, first complain about people who are doing this and then try to fix it up on the fly for them. Although Jordan's less convinced that that's a good idea, such that we can eventually, in like 4 to 6 releases, actually undo Antonio's sloppy parsing and go back to the strict parsing, but it will take us some time to march users into that.
And the strict parsing is to not allow any zeros at all, or?
That's right.
Okay, yeah, good.
Just give up. Just pretend it's not.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very clear and well defined, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
so at
Cal
least
has his hand up. I don't know if that's
No.
obvious when you're sharing, but
It's not. Go ahead, Cal.
No, I was just leaning in and say I support a statement that Tim made, and we cannot break a behavior that we allowed. There is always some guy with a small PC under this chronic Kubernetes cluster. And we're gonna break this.
Features. I mean, features get deprecated, right? That's just another thing that gets deprecated.
Yeah, but this is a predictable life cycle, right? We can deprecate the behavior. The problem is undocumented behavior. It has always been that. The undocumented behavior that's
So
in the API.
What this issue lays out is a path towards fixing it for people so that we can turn it off, right? It's just going to take longer than we'd like it to take.
There is also the nasty approach of fixing it behind the scene at the storage level.
That was like step 9 or something, but let's move the I have that tool, Carl. I mean, I spend 1 or 2 months with this, and I also have a tool that goes through each CD and fixes the IPs. But I couldn't API.
Another option here could be that we allow updates to IP fields, like we allow it in service, but only if you're translating it from like 011 to 11. If you change it from 011 to 9, you get an error, but if you change it to 11, then we allow it. And then we put this tool out there and we tell people, if you hit this error, run this tool and it will fix your service for you.
After all the mess that I was personally there, like I was watching you, right? Like it's not like I've heard of it. I was there. You're actually proposing this? Fine. You're way braver than me, but yeah. If you support
I don't think
this,
you don't want that kind of support nightmare. Can you imagine the confused people opening issues? No.
Let's
or not opening issues and just being terrible.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Let's take the discussion to this issue, but it is an issue. I don't think we should keep the sloppy parsing forever. I think the first step is to make sure that we all agree for any net new API that adds an IP field anywhere, we should use non-sloppy parsing and just not allow the problem to get worse. Like first, stop digging. Okay, so I've already removed triage from this issue. Anybody who's interested, feel free to jump on. Next, UDP, IPVS, node reboot issue. I remember scanning this one today. It looks tricky. Something contract. Somebody maybe who's got some IPVS experience wants to help prove if it's real? It's a decent bug report. There's a fair amount of detail in it.
Yeah, I can take this one. It's Andrew second.
So this is Vivek, right? And he's also working on the Caping, the QProx next generation on
I didn't know that.
Ipvs there, I think.
Okay, I didn't know that. So that's
I think I recognize the name. I will check immediately.
okay. Yeah, my mental map of names to project has overflowed.
Yeah. No, that's.
Okay, Andrew, take a look, see if you think it's real, and or maybe if it goes beyond IPVS, like it could just be, you know, over clearing contract or something in some corner case.
Yep, sounds good.
It's been a problem in the past anyway. Unable to remove endpoints from Kubernetes at start. Antonio's been looking. Oh, this is you who filed it. Sorry. Can you give us a brief on it?
I don't remember. What?
I don't remember.
Okay. Yes, this is because.
I think this is only a problem with the integration tests.
Okay.
The API server code assumes you will never try to remove the last API server and logs an error if you do, but the integration tests do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's assigned to you. Should we just close it, or you want to follow up with a comment?
No, I need to fix this. I don't know.
You're
if
going to
it's
fix it.
already fixed. The problem is that I started to fix this and I found two more bugs, so I lost track. So just triage it and I will circle back.
Okay.
To it.
Just make sure you add some comments here so that if you add some comments soon, so that if you forget to circle back, we'll at least remember what happened. Thanks. Last one for today, controller manager failed to start endpoint slice controller. This one I think we looked at a while ago, but I don't know that we made any real progress on it.
They have a problem with the controller manager because the API server has some failures and then they reproduce it. I think that they have a setup that is a bit broken and they want to find a workaround or something like that.
Okay, so there's been some updates. Was that the OP? No. No updates from the original poster there. 7 days. I lost it there 7 days ago. Trying to replicate. So Antonio, do you think it's a hopeless case, or do you think there's more work to do?
I will reply. I mean, and try to convince them that they need to have a healthy API server, otherwise it can fail in.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all of the triage I had for today. Next on our agenda, Rahul talking about FQDN again.
Yep, absolutely. Just in the interest of getting to everyone, do we want to time bound this? What's a reasonable limit? Like 15 minutes, 20 minutes? I don't know.
We don't have a whole lot of agenda beyond this. Rob, how much time do you need?
10, 15, 10. I don't know. It's
And Cal?
complicated.
Cal, how much time do you need?
I'm trying to find the unmute button. I have 5 minutes, no more.
Okay, so then we need 20. So let's give you 20.
All right, sounds good. I'll just set a timer so I don't forget. All right, so yeah, this is a follow-up from 2 weeks ago when we were talking about FQDN policies. In the interim, thank you to everyone who commented on the doc. It's still open, so feel free to throw your comments if you haven't already. There was a couple of things I wanted to go through, just clarifications for things that came up as comments, and then also an open question for folks to discuss. The first has to do with the behavior of what we're proposing. So I just wanted to clarify that since I think it didn't come through properly. The behavior that I think I've heard from users that they want to enforce is a data path block. So when they say allow traffic to wikipedia.org, they really want to make sure that hard-coded IPs can't egress and somehow exfiltrate data. So it's not sufficient for the customers I've spoken to just have DNS filtering. They really do want a data path protection. And that's really central to what they're looking for. The corollary to that essentially is that, and Dan did a really good job of explaining this, and I copied his text, is that we need to use the allow list with implicit deny model for any of the FQDN matches. The rationale there goes that if you try to write a deny rule with an FQDN, you're never guaranteed to have a full list of IPs that you're denying. DNS doesn't have any guarantees on completeness. And so writing a deny rule is just inherently fraught and messy behavior. So the assumption here is that the only reasonable way of expressing intent is to have a list of allowed domains, or maybe prefix matched domains, and then everything else gets dropped. That's just a few clarifications out of the way. Did anyone want to comment on that or have any questions?
Does that mean that if the user doesn't do a DNS lookup before they access an IP, that it will be denied?
Yeah, that's one of the things that also came up. And my thinking is that's how it has to be. There's like reverse lookups are not reliable, is the consensus.
No.
And so I think you have to require that a DNS lookup be made before you try to send out traffic, which I know it runs into issues with caches, or if users are doing something funky, it might be problematic. But I think that's the only way to reasonably enforce this policy. All right.
That implies then that you need to, well, specify that it's possible to intercept the DNS call somewhere, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
I think in the beginning you're gonna have to specify something like saying that if someone used TLSs or something like that, that doesn't work currently, and that maybe it's something we can look at how to support down the road. But right now that would not work, right? If someone wants to do I've played around with the idea to say, okay, I want to provide a secure Kubernetes system that would sort of have as its default that all this stuff would be TLS. That would obviously not work in such a system. And if that is specified and made clear, then I think it needs to be, right? Because we don't want to have CNIs to start climbing into the pods and break into the namespace and try to figure out how to get this not from networking traffic, but rather go and try to do a system call checks and stuff like that, right? It's a slippery slope. So as long as it's very clear sort of what the circumstances are when this can be used, and then that for now it stops you from using secure TLS, and that you need probably then to, well, you should be able to intercept the others, and sort of that you can't use quick and as such things for this, right? So yes, if that behavior is crystal clear, then it should be possible to do.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. It's one question, because it took me a while to understand the proposal, and because of the comments you clarified. My question is, for conceptually, it's clear right now to me. What I don't know if it's realistic that you can do that. I mean, for GitHub, Wikipedia, all of these people, maybe you can assume then DNS one IP. My question is, what happens with people use these CDNs or multi-hosting, all these kind of things? I mean, false positive on something that blocks traffic is risky. So the concept now I understand what you're trying to achieve. If you say this domain and you want to stop the traffic, you don't want to filter by DNS, but it's realistic that you can cover at least 80% of the cases.
That's a very good point. I don't have a good like answer to that at this point. Like if there's not a one-to-one mapping between, or at least like a many-to-one, if the IPs aren't unique across FQDNs, you end up with a weird situation.
And Dan Winship made a good comment, because all these corner cases, if we define an API, I think that we should define the expected behavior. Otherwise, we're going to have an API with 300 implementations, and everybody is going to have something different.
Well, I mean, I think it's patently obvious at anything more than cursory inspection that like lots of sites out there use the same IP for multiple hosts, right? And so if I do a DNS lookup on one of those hosts, then I can access all of them, right?
If you use Cloudflare or one of these CDNs, you don't have IPs, right?
Well, I mean, ultimately you get an IP, but you get enabled for anything that Cloudflare is serving.
Right. That's my question, is what happens when you go to one of these crazy services? Suppose you are dropping, you don't drop, you say...
No, I have to disagree on this one. So the first I agree, the 80%. This part I do not agree. If you are trying, the user should, if somebody tried to use FQDN and that maps to, I don't know, Akamai, you can't stop them. Right?
I think we're agreeing.
Yeah. So
would it be sufficient in this case to add that as one of the requirements, like alongside, we don't support TLS right now. The second point is if your FQDN is going to resolve to a CDN or a shared IP, we can't do any better than allow listing that IP, and whatever's behind that is all allowed.
Have you looked over the semantics that it really works for V6 as well, right? Okay, if you look up, you get the full V6, but I think I don't see really any problems, but for like I said, for outgoing, but for incoming, definitely, right? The addresses change all the time on a non-statically configured machines and services. I think you're fine, but I think we need to make sure.
So I mentioned in one of the comments, like, especially if we're talking about getting stuff behind a CDN, if you're getting stuff behind a CDN, it's HTTP. You could use an HTTP proxy, in which case you can restrict it to specific hosts, even if they're all on the same CDN. And like, people are saying that they want this at the L4 level because we provide them with L4 solutions, but a lot of them really want it at the L7 level, I think. Like, and if we could just make it easy for them to set up an HTTP proxy that would do the filtering that they want, I think a lot of users would end up being happier with that than with having us doing DNS snooping. Although some of them do still need the DNS snooping.
And is that something we want to even open the door to?
I mean, Thomas had like tried to convince us to add L7 support to network policy years ago, and there was some, support behind that. I mean, yeah, maybe we have to start looking at L7 at some point.
Is it policy really, or egress policy in this case? Is it like similar to egress controllers who are looking to egress controllers, and then the entire configuration of egress controllers follow API gateway style common API where people adopt what they want? So that's actually a good way. I think Dan, you're hitting a nice spot here. Leave the API, the network policy API as is, and for anybody who wants to do funky stuff with L7, we come up with egress controllers. The only thing the system will provide In this case, is configuration where all the traffic is proxied from the pod to egress controllers. That might solve all the problems.
It's not that hard to put on sort of, I think in most implementation on the policy enforcement point that there is a layer 7 there. So you first do a layer 3 check, and then you forward it through a service chain to the layer 7 check. That is unproblematic, I think.
And then people with serious firewall kamikaze skills or ninja skills, they can come up with interesting implementation for checking and inspection and all of that stuff. And it can go both ways, by the way.
So I guess one thing right now, like even though people could use other products to set up an HTTP proxy easily, there's no way to say my pods can talk to this HTTP proxy, but they can't talk to anything else. Like there's no easy way. I guess depending on how you do it.
You can always force in and well, it has to know which ports you need to force, right? And then you can do a DNAT. But for if you send to port XYZ and it's HTTP, there's really no way to find, right? Unless you do DPI, and we don't want to do that.
So I was just gonna say, like maybe even if we're not going to provide a solution to actually do the L7 filtering, maybe we could make sure that we make it easy to integrate with other people's solutions.
Because it's fairly nice, because then you can also insert, if you want, your certificates and so on, so that there can actually be a proxying of it where you can open up, basically offload the encryption to the proxy so that you can do all these checks.
So we are finally doing the service mesh. That team.
Yeah,
that's where you end up. I mean, or we should link in. We should link in so we can push
This is kidding. But
well, I mean, you're kidding, but not really. Like we've been very sort of trepidatious going there. This is a bigger step forward. I'm trying to figure out if there's a smaller primitive that we need to enable these sorts of things without necessarily becoming one, right? Like we don't have a service chaining API that says, guarantee me that all the output from this pod goes to this other pod first, right? Like maybe that's the API that we need. Bowie says yet.
That's I think the first half. So somehow the pod template will have a flag that says this pod is proxied to a service IP, or we need to figure it out. And then
sorry.
Not the CNI. The CNI is not responsible because the CNI doesn't know which pod is what. And then that's what we do from our side. That's the only thing we do initially. Then people can build the egress around that. They can deploy a JA proxy, configure it, whatever we do, and then really come up with elaborate APIs around how these things could be configured, and then they become egress providers.
So quick question though. Didn't Raul like kind of start this out by saying no, like from what he's heard, no layer 7? Like this is going to be more of an IP. Data path sort of implementation. I don't know. What do you think about, the concept of a proxy, Rahul?
Well, I mean, I think proxy as an implementation is fine, right? Like I think, going back to what we were trying to scope this to is like very specifically, I think we still want this to be an L4 policy. It's just, it's being specified using FQDNs, which are arguably a higher level construct, but the goal is still boil it down to an IP, a port, and go from there.
Well, I think the challenge that Dan was offering is for those customers who are asking for this, what percentage of them are actually sending HTTP after they do all this? Right? If it's 90% of them, then what they're really asking for is better served by a proxy. If they're saying, no, really, we're doing non-HTTP stuff, some other TCP protocol or something, then we have to not, that isn't a good solution.
Right, that makes more sense. I tend to agree with Dan on that one in terms of customers I've seen. Like a lot of them may not know the difference, but they're doing more HTTP stuff.
I think it's kind of unfair to assume that the kind of the proxies works well with HTTP just because they are well specified. People do proxies for all other things such as caching, like bringing cache closer to the consumers and. So even the custom TCP protocol can have its own proxy in the middle. It doesn't use HTTP.
Right, but the point was just if you're using HTTP proxies already 100% solve this issue of I want to limit access by DNSing. So
I think Rahul, one thing that would help, because I think what I'm hearing from the discussions is it ranges over. People are like, well, what if the target CDN? Maybe if we can follow it up with like some understanding where the users are coming from, like what is their use case? Because I think it sounds like from the conversation here that there are a ton of different use cases. Some make sense, some don't make sense. Well, maybe we can clarify on that. And I have to say, like, it's clear, given if you look at the major implementations out there, like they do support this, all of them in some form. And clearly users want this. They may be, kind of doing the wrong thing, but they definitely want to express something.
Yeah, I mean, I can try to come back and do some more digging on, I guess, like a short survey of what people are trying to do. I'll also check in with, I think Andrew and Gobind did this maybe a year or so back, so we can also try to dig up that data.
Yeah, I mean, some really concrete examples of what people are trying to do with this would be helpful, especially if they're not, and then I use HTTP. The other thing I think, go ahead.
I guess my question was, would we fit to the least common denominator? Like if I come back with one example of someone who says, I want a full L7 proxy, one example of someone who says, I want to do like, UDP traffic, and one example of someone who says, I have a special TCP protocol, like what's the threshold of, yes, we'll do this at L4 versus no, we really want to make a L7 proxy. I guess it's an open question to everyone. Like, what's the threshold of believability here?
So for TCP, I mean, the question obviously is really, are you okay with running with two connections? Basically, that the proxy would break it and copy between two connections, or do you require a transparent TCP proxy, basically where you there's only one transport connection and you have a proxy in the middle that basically breaks this up, which is doable, but it has a lot of side effects. But I agree with you. Figure out what are the use cases. Everything is possible to do, right? But not of them are smart to do.
I mean, look, I'm really reluctant for us to take on putting a service proxy in the data path on the user's behalf. That feels like a step too far for the core of Kubernetes. Like Cilium does it, and that's cool, and Calico does it, and that's cool. But those are things that the users are signing up for specifically, right? For something about it just doesn't feel like it's the right thing to be normalizing. But
to make it mandatory feels like a really, really big step.
There are people who care a lot about performance.
Yeah, and we have a hard time making anything mandatory at this point. But the other side of it, though, is if all the use cases really point down to we'd like to force inject something on the data path, like maybe that is really what we should be looking at, is some sort of service chaining API that plugins can implement, and then chain to an L7 or chain to a custom proxy or whatever that API would look like. I don't really know, but
we are force chaining. We are already doing stuff on the data path. I mean, the entire IV tables for routing and load balancing. Come on, we are already doing that. The argument can be made, and we're not forcing any. Like when I thought of this, I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if I can, as I say, okay, these group of pods, regardless how they are identified, must use this proxy for auditing, for routing, for
yes,
I don't know. Now the only way people do that now is init containers, and then they
Yes.
force the traffic sidecars. All right. So we're not saying that everybody should use a proxy, but I'm a strong believer that all the L7 by nature is traffic inspection. You have to unpack the thing to know where it's going. Otherwise, you're just guessing.
And the challenge is that more and more is expecting the traffic to be encrypted, right? And it needs to work in that sort of framework.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer of value versus like the value of the thing versus the thing I'm asking for. Like I want little, I use little. I want more, I use more. Right. So right now I want little IP L4 and all the routing stuff. That's the system gives you that. You want more, then you're gonna have to do more and configure more. So just the effort equal value to me.
Just a quick time check. We're at 20, just past 20 minutes. So
yeah.
I don't know if you want to move on. Or...
yeah, we should push ahead. I'm not sure what the follow-up is. I don't want to like more data this to death, but I also don't feel like I have a footing to say what we need yet.
Yeah, I can maybe start sketching out what sort of data we want to gather and ping some folks who mentioned that here, and we can try to come up with some plan forward.
Yeah, maybe
would
start
also-
like a mailing list. Like I think you were just trying to say that, Ricardo, but that'd be a good conversation to start.
When we originally brought this up, somebody brought this up like about 2 years ago, and they brought it to the original, remember those old network policy working groups where all we did was just like argue about stuff like before. And I remember like nobody cared about this then, or like somebody proposed this or some version of it. I don't know. And then there was, I think, a mailing list thread about it, but I don't know.
Yeah, at the time
Maybe
though,
it's
we were
popular.
still thinking of it as a transliterator that would, convert DNS into network policy. So we obviously didn't.
No, I mean the broader like service mesh thing that we're talking about now, where you have a choke point route thing.
I think it can actually make service meshes better.
Oh, I'm actually fairly convinced that having such an API is the right thing to do. I'm not sure it's the right thing for this particular problem.
Yeah.
But I think having seen what I've seen service meshes do, it feels like some sort of service chaining mechanism could actually open a lot of doors for us.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we're implementing a security solution. I mean, basically a network policy and in the policy enforcement point, you can send it to a DPI solution that can scan the stream for a while and so on. So it's like you say, it's very possible to do with service chaining. The question is that there needs to be more than one way to implement things, right? And not force anyone to go down that path.
That's right.
Let's take it to the mailing list. I'm gonna go ask a few of the people I know are big on using Kubernetes for similar things. All right. And I know that even cloud providers like us, they provide like proxy solution and firewall solution for egress traffic. So maybe we'll see. Let me go ask and I'll share whatever I heard. I think Bridget was saying CNCF has a surveying option for people to use. So maybe we should use this to get some feeling, because right now we're talking about perspectives, which can be narrow or wide. We can never tell. So let's collect data.
Okay. Cal, you're next on the agenda then.
No, I just have this PR that was so hot during that days about people were complaining about the host changing IPs. So folks running on non-cloud environment, typically speaking, and their host changing IP, the pod status, the host IP doesn't change. So we came up with this PR and then it got hot and then the discussion was dropped to other priorities. So I just want to should we carry it on or just close it?
I personally don't think that there is a strong case behind It's just people that has a Raspberry or something attached to the DSL modem, and at least all the reports that I saw were that case.
I think the original question is, should we consider this behavior as a broken behavior or just what?
Sorry, I lost
You
you.
cut
The
out.
behavior,
Yeah.
the behavior of, we do not prescribe what will happen if the host IP change to pods. That behavior is currently unprescribed.
What?
So
it's the one that we have, no? It's the pods.
For cloud providers, we patch the node. We don't patch the pods. So yeah, look at the file. Yeah. If you look at we don't patch the host IP.
But we do patch the node IP?
We do patch the node IPs, yes. Yep.
When do
like
you
especially
patch?
cloud providers. Yeah, I remember seeing it. I can look and see. But I remember
You say that a node changed its IP.
So specifically pods that are running in host network. What
Right.
happens if the node changes its IP?
Yeah, but
That behavior.
That's the thing is right now is the node doesn't change the IP and only when it reboots.
It could happen if you're using like DHCP and your lease expires, and then you try to get another lease, and the server just gives another IP for another.
Yeah, but when we discussed this, is that people is putting a lot of control plane stuff and important services on static pods. The pod spawns and